everyone, I'm Heather. I'm back for a really quick book chat. I'm on my lunch break. I have my coffee and my hummus bagel. And I haven't done a whole hell of a lot of lunch break book chats recently because my kids' school Christmas break got extended. Like they went home for Christmas break and then have been off this whole time, or like homeschooling, but she's 6, so there's not a whole hell of a lot of actual homeschooling going on. Like they don't learn well in homeschool. So I'm back today for my long lost book chat because she's back in school. Can I get a hey? Hey, hey. She's super excited. I'm super excited. It's the way of the world. I felt really emotional this morning as well when I took her back, because it's just like seeing all the munchkins together at school. It's just like a feeling of a rightness with the world. So I mean, like everything's falling apart, politics, pandemic, everything is through the floor. But you know, kids are in the yard telling each other their boots are pretty and stuff. Like it's a healing, it's a process. Anyway, I find myself with some luxurious free time, a whole hour, and I thought, what do I want to do? Let's talk books. Oh, I love to talk books. So I was just gonna, go over roughly. I think I haven't updated on things I've read in ages, so I couldn't just like update on all the things I've read that I haven't updated about. I had to sort of just pick the recent ones really, so I've got a smattering here. Also things I'm reading at the minute that I haven't finished yet, and also some plans coming up. What are my thoughts about March potentially? So one that I recently finished this month is for Bert's 90s book club, and it was Second Nature by Alice Hoffman. So despite the fact that this book is hideous, like why is this cover so terrible? What is it even supposed to be? It's but ugly and I'm offended by it. But anyway, read the actual book, and the actual book is delightful. So good. So the idea is it's like a wolf man, right? So you go into these, like all these stories about these kids raised by wolves or whatever. So this kid, he was in a plane crash and he was like 3-4 years old, something like that, and his parents died and he was the only one that survives. And the wolves, or whatever, wolves? Like the wolves come to the airplane and sniff him around, and then he sort of follows them, and then they start to wait for him to catch up, and he's just sort of slowly in this migration back to their house. He's like adopted into the family and he's raised by wolves. So then he's caught, like as an adult, he's caught in a bear trap, and the trappers find him and they send him off, to the world of people, and he goes to this sort of mental institution where this guy's sort of in charge of it, and the sister of the guy comes to visit him, but then sees this wolf man, sees that he's stuck, and he's like, please help me. So she helps him escape, and she just sort of like lives with him in her house or whatever. Like he's sort of absorbed into the town and blah blah. Like I won't give you any more about it, but like there's this quote in it that I actually wrote down because I really liked it, because they went back and sort of asked this man, this trapper man that originally found him, like, do you think he's, how do you feel about what happened, And the trapper said, oh, I've never felt right about it. I think we should have left him there, I think he might have bled out, whatever, but it's better for him. I never felt good about sending him into the world of people, and he's never learned to defend himself from people, Like you'd think, oh, the wilderness is the most dangerous place for a child, but he's sort of saying, he's learned to sort of protect himself against the wilderness. It's the people he should be worried about, I really like that. It was a good pick. Like, I think today is the day that we get to vote on the next one for the 90s book club, so pretty excited. The theme is Sister Sister for this upcoming one, so don't know what it'll be, but God, I love Sister Sister. Anyway, another one that I've recently read was actually for my sort of theme for the month, which was smut and horror. Felt like those were going to go really together, like sort of Valentine's month in a pandemic, smut and horror. It's actually worked out really well. Everything I've read this month has been really good, except for a couple things. But it's called My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, and I read it for Evil-a-thon, and I loved it. It was so good. So like the idea is like, I don't know where it is. I'm in my house, or like in my upstairs, and all my books just sort of end up around all over the place. So I can't find this one. It's probably downstairs somewhere. The idea for this one is it's like these kids in the 1980s. They go to this sort of fancy, like private school in the south. And they're best friends, all four of them. But they go to this like lake house, and they're sort of hanging out at the lake house, and they decide to do acid, but it's not really working. And one of the girls decides to go skinny dipping, but then she sort of runs off into the darkness and disappears, and they can't find her. And her like best friend, like of the four, her very best friend, who's been her friend since they were little, like she goes through the woods looking for her. She finds this really creepy shack, and she's so terrified by the shack, and she sort of hears a man's voice, and there's all this craziness. She runs away from it, you know. And they don't find her until the morning, when she decides to go back to the shack. She's like, I think there's something about the shack. And then she finds the missing girl, and the girl looks weird, you know. She's like not wearing her clothes, like she's acting strangely, blah, blah, blah. So then they all go back to high school. They pretend to like, you know, forget about it. It's completely fine. We'll not worry about it. But then her behavior gets crazy. She starts doing crazy stuff. Like there's this one point where she's talking to her friend, and she's saying really mean stuff, you know. She's like, oh, like, I can't remember what she's saying, but she's being really mean. But her hand is like going independently of her body. And then her friend's sort of looking at her in the eyes as she's saying this really mean stuff. But then she just glances down at her hand, and her hand had written, not me, not me, not me, help me, like that. Oh my god. It was just like loads of really good things like that. And like loads of just like 80s things, you know? Like he'd portrayed like teenage girls in the 80s really well, and I really liked it. It was really good. And has like a relatively happy ending. So you wouldn't think that an Exorcist book would do that, but it did. Anyway, loved it. Next on the list, The Blunderer by Patricia Highsmith. Holy crap, I've not read any Patricia Highsmith before. Like obviously I knew a bit of hers, like what's that movie, like Mr. Ripley or whatever, that was based on her book, obviously. And I knew that she was sort of like one of these psychological thriller type authors, but I'd not read anything. So Bert decided this was going to be like an amazing book, like a 5-star read, and I was like, ooh, I need to read that. So we ended up reading it together. Holy shit, it was so good. We read it over the course of like 4 days, and it had me on edge all 4 days, and it got dark, and it got darker, and then it ended. Like, she just kept me on edge for 4 days, and then just let me go, like, to find my own way in the world after she just like hollowed me out. It was crazy. So the idea is this guy hates his wife. He doesn't hate his wife. He has like difficulties with his wife, right? So he's like asked for a divorce before, and she's been like, we can't get a divorce. She like, you know, says she's gonna kill herself or whatever, and he's like, fine. So they make up. And then later on, they're still having trouble. Like, she's like moving toward isolating him from all his friends. Like, she doesn't call his friends back, or she hates his friends, or she like tells his friends things like he doesn't want to go to parties and stuff. So he's like, I want a divorce. She's like, fine, I'm gonna kill myself. And he's like, you're not gonna kill yourself. And she tries to kill herself. So like a whole thing. And sort of as this is going on, as their relationship is breaking down, he's reading in the paper about this guy who murdered his wife at a bus stop, but they're not sure that he did it. Like, we know that he did it, because the very first opening scene is that he did it. But it's sort of like this person's wife was murdered, blah, blah, and he's reading it, and he's like, I think it was probably the husband, but it's not something that they know. So he like clips it out, because he likes clipping out newspaper things. And sort of as he's starting to get more and more obsessed with being like really hating his wife and not wanting to be married to his wife, he starts to get more obsessed with this guy who's killed his wife. And he goes and he like visits him and stuff at his bookstore in Newark and stuff. But anyway, like stuff goes down, like I won't tell you. But it comes to a point where he's like accused of some stuff, and he's got to convince this like crazy like inspector guy, like this really intense 1950s like, you know, private eye, but not a private eye, he's like police, he's like this investigator guy who's really intense, you know, he's like a badass, he's always like fighting people and like pushing people and like being super investigatory and stuff. Anyway, he's got to try to convince everyone and his friends and everyone that he didn't do this terrible thing. But also his friends start sort of knocking off as well. They're like, oh, we're with you. But then as more and more stuff comes out, they're like, oh, we don't know if you're innocent, blah, blah. And like the ending's just crazy. Anyway, I thought it was really good. I don't think the ending was the ending I expected, and also maybe not the ending that I would have chosen for that. You know, I feel like the ending could have been better. But because the whole of the rest of the book was just so amazing and kept me on edge and for like 4 days, I don't even care that the ending was less than ideal. Like, when I think about it now, like the ending does sort of fit with it, you know? Like, it's just fitting. But anyway, there's that one. Those were the really good ones. Oh no, actually there's another good one that I just randomly like popped up with. It was on my borrow box on my like audiobook library app thing. And I like see them and I put them on hold or whatever, and then they just sort of pop up at will and I have to listen to them before they expire. So I had to just sort of listen to this one before it expires. Wasn't really expecting anything about it. And it is That Old Country Music by Kevin Barry. And he wrote like The Night Boat to Tangier or something like that. And I knew that he'd written that, and I knew that loads of people love that book. I haven't read it. I'm gonna read it now. That's for damn sure, because I basically will read everything that's ever been written by Kevin Barry from now on because he's amazing. But That Old Country Music book, it's like a bunch of stories based around like country areas, or like specifically this sort of one country area in Ireland, but also some sort of other things. And it's just a bunch of stories, and like some of them are really short and some of them are a bit longer. In most of them, nothing in particular happens. It's just sort of gorgeous writing all the way through, like really descriptive. Like, he writes characters and dialogue really well. So even though he'll only have a couple pages to sort of write out a whole person's life story, you know, like he gets that person's character across really well, and like the dialogue is amazing just in that sort of small space. It was just, and like also the audiobook itself is read by this guy, like I don't know his name, I can sort of put up, but his voice is Irish voice, and the way he reads it, so just gorgeous writing, gorgeous descriptions, this guy's gorgeous voice. It was just amazing. I'm dead now. I have put every Kevin Barry thing that he's ever written on my list, and it's happening. Okay. This is turning out to be a longer visit, or a longer video than I originally planned, and I apologize for that. That's nice. Okay. So my reading and listening to everything this month has been really good. But there were two that I wasn't really for. Two audiobooks. First one is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And it's sort of the idea of this one is like a secret society in Yale University. That's like a spiritual thing, like the society, they're all supposed to play sort of specific set out roles in this spiritual society, like sort of like guardians of gateway and like various things. Like they're in this house that's like an ancient magical house or whatever, and they're like the guardians of this thing or whatever. One of these guys goes missing quite early on. Another one has like a really rough backstory, like she can see dead people, very sixth sense. And she has done her whole life, so she's sort of had these like mental health problems, or like what people think are mental health problems, where they don't believe her, they think she's crazy, she sees these dead people, she starts taking drugs, blah blah, in order to sort of deal with the stigma of being the only person that can see dead people. Anyway, I didn't really like it. I think like it went on for ages, first of all, and it just kept going and kept going, kept going. I just couldn't get into it. Like, the characters weren't very good. And I think Leigh Bardugo, as an author, I've read a couple other ones by that author, and I've not really been able to get into them all. I think quite a few of them were actually YA, and I think that's the problem. Like, I'm not a hugely sort of YA type fan. And even though this book, Ninth House, wasn't a YA book, you know, is still a YA author, and I think all that happened was it was the same sort of writing and everything, except like more adult elements. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't a fan. And then another one was Mexican Gothic by... shoot. I can't remember the author, but I'll put it up. I just like, she's in my mind, Sylvia Moreno Garcia. That's what it is. And she also wrote another one that's on my list that I really want to read, which is like Gods of Jade and something. I'll put that one up as well. I'm having a terrible time remembering things now. But like, I really wanted to read this one. I really want to read the other one. So I did a buddy read with Morgan, and we were both sort of like reading it and going through it, and she started to like flag way earlier than me. Morgan did. She was like, this is not good, the writing is not good, like I can't even keep going, and she had to just be like, I'm sorry, I can't, like, and just DNF'd it. But hers was a physical book, whereas mine was an audiobook, and sort of with an audiobook it's easier to sort of keep it going. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can sort of do your grocery shopping while it goes on in the background. It doesn't matter that it's a bit crap, you know? But I completely agree with her. I think like the writing just wasn't doing it for me, and like the plot line, like, it was a really good idea. So the idea is that this girl in Mexico in the 50s, she's rich. Her cousin writes to her and says that her new husband's trying to kill her. And she's like, oh, come quick, come get me. So the girl goes to visit her in this like huge creepy old mansion. And there's like something up with it, like the people act really weird. Like the family's been there a really long time, but they're not like rich anymore, something like that. Like, it's all a bit of a mystery, and some creepy stuff starts going on, and everyone starts having these nightmares, blah blah. I really liked the idea, like the sort of way that it was set out, and like the, you know, the setup and everything. But how it played out, it didn't play out well. Like, the writing I didn't think was very good. Like, the characters were a bit crap. Like, there's like a thing to do with some mushrooms. It didn't even make any sense. I was just against it. Like, I thought it was bad. But Morgan was like, don't let that set you against the other one, because she'd read the other one by that author, the Jade and whatever one, and said even though she didn't absolutely love that one, like, she thought it was better and that I should still read it. So I will do. But obviously, once I've got it in my mind, that's probably not going to be very good. It like ends up going like further and further down the list, so I don't know when I'll get to it. But I really should. I want to give this author another chance, because I had like such high hopes, and I've heard so many good things. So many people love it so much, and I think maybe I just got it in my head that it wasn't good, and then it could never recover after I decided that. Do you know what I mean? So the ones I'm working on at the minute are super good. So the first one I'm like reading in a physical book is the Bridgerton book, like the first one, The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. And I told my mom about this. My mom was like, did you know that Julia Quinn's from Seattle? She's literally from where we're from. And I didn't know that. She was just on like, you know, the morning program or whatever back home. My mom was like, oh, Julia Quinn was on the morning show this morning. Which is crazy. Maybe I know someone who knows her. That always happens with people that are from Seattle, like Bill Nye. I was talking to my cousin about Bill Nye, and she's like, did you know that my aunt dated him? She was like his first girlfriend. What? Now I just need to find someone who knows Macklemore, and I'm set. But anyway, like this one, if you've not seen Bridgerton, you should do, because it's amazing. Generally, it's this sort of Regency type girl. She's sort of coming out, ready for her like second or third season or whatever, trying to find a husband. She's having a hard time getting a husband because everyone sees her as a friend, not as like a sexual object. So she needs to rectify that. Also, there's a guy who's newly made a duke because his dad just died, but he hates his dad's because he had like a stutter as a kid, and the dad was really embarrassed by it and said like, I have no son, blah blah blah. He's got it under control now, doesn't really stutter that much, but he still hates his dad. So his idea is that he's not going to get married, he's not going to have any kids, because he wants the line of that type of duke to just end with him. Like, that's going to be the ultimate FU to his terrible dad. Like, it just ends with him. But he needs to get all these women and like desperate mothers, like desperate to sell their children off into like weddings and stuff. He needs to get them off his back when he goes to parties. So he like does a deal with so Daphne and the Duke, they do a deal where they pretend to be courting. So it brings people's attention to the fact that Daphne can be a sex object. She's now courting someone, you know, sort of like raises the idea that she's not just a friend, she can actually be a wife. And also makes it so that people stop messing with the Duke, because they're like, oh, he's already decided who he wants to marry. And we'll see how it goes from there. I've heard that the book and the series are quite different, so already they're sort of a bit different. So I don't know what happens in the book, but in the series, I do already know. There's a lot of knowing going on with me in the series. But we'll see how the book goes. I'm really liking it so far. The next thing is the audiobook that I'm listening to at the minute. It's called The Rogue Not Taken by Sarah MacLean. I love a bit of Sarah MacLean, me. She's like the ultimate smutty sort of book author. And I thought that this one was going to be terrible. It's like one of the free ones on BorrowBox. I thought it was going to be terrible, but in the best way, and I was right. The writing is not fantastic, but like the characters are good. Like the idea is this girl, she's aristocratic, and she has these sisters who are married to like rich aristocratic people. She embarrasses herself at some sort of party or whatever by throwing her brother-in-law in a pond or something, and she's like, fine, it's too embarrassing, I can't go back to London, you know, I've gotta, or I can't stay by here, I've got to go away. So she asks this guy who's like a bit of a rogue if he'll take her in his carriage home. And he's like, no, of course not. So she's like, but I really need it. So she pretends to be his footman. She like pays the footman to give her his outfit and like just wears it and goes off. But they end up not going where she thought they were going. They aren't just going home. They're going like all the way like miles and miles and miles up north, and she doesn't know that until it's way too late. And then, you know, various things ensue. There's a highwayman situation, there's some shooting situations, there's action, adventure. Now the Duke is starting to see her, not for this annoying person that wanted to like come in his carriage with him, but like, you know, a sex object. What? So that's pretty exciting. Pretty pumped about that. For March, so my reads upcoming, I've decided to do both Middle Grade March and Dewithon. So Dewithon is the sort of Wales related readathon that I did last year. It's in March because St. David's Day, like the National Day of Wales or whatever, it is in March. It's March 1st. So I've decided to do both, and I think that I'm going to do a buddy read with Sean. This book that both of us have had for ages and have always said that we're going to read, but like, you know, we hadn't convinced ourselves it was time yet because it's going to be a bit dry, we think. But you know, like a forced buddy read of a book may be the only way that I'm actually going to read it, and it's W.H. Davis' Diary of a Supertramp or something like that, where it's this like Welshman, I think like early 20th century or something like that. He goes to America, has various adventures, like I think he lands in jail for a bit. My husband recommended it to me on the video that we did where we give each other recommendations, and sometimes things that my husband likes are good, but most of the time things that my husband likes are super boring. So we'll have to see if it's actually going to be good. But even if it's bad, you know, reading it with Sean should be fun. You know, maybe there are funny comments to be made about how bad and like boring it will be. Maybe it will be amazing. Maybe it'll be one of the best books that I've read. Keeping my mind open to it. There's also a couple of middle grade reads that I have in my house which are also Welsh related, like set in Wales or written by a Welsh author. So there can be some merging of some things. I'll do, I think, probably a TBR for both of them upcoming, maybe next week. But also upcoming we have the new 90s book club book, and also the new book for my book club for people in the office, like my friends at work. We do a book club, and the new one for next month is the Authenticity Project, which, to be honest, I wasn't really like hugely for. When they said, I was like, oh, it's going to be a bit of like a miss month, you know, like I'm going to read that book obviously, but I'm not going to enjoy it very much. But I've been sort of like listening to other people talk about it. Now I might be sort of on board. It's not really my sort of book, but I think I'm sort of on board. I've already bought it. It was only £4 in Tesco. You know, what can go wrong? Okay. I think I'm going to stop there. I've got more that I could say, but I'm not going to talk your ear off about this. We've had a chat. Let's just leave it there. I am 100% open to any comments you might have, recommendations based on these things, or like if you've read them, how you feel about them, you know, lay it on me. I fully am excited about the conversation that happens in the comments section. Right. Thank you for watching. I will see you later.